Welcome, welcome, guys. Hope everybody is good. Hope everybody is good. Yeah, I've heard it's hot in the UK right now. I'm still here in Dubai. I'm here for another couple of weeks, and then I get to go home. Right, let's go through everything that's obviously been happened this morning. And obviously gold here. Look at this. I actually think if this continues, the copper could kick in the next hour. So. Let's wait and see. But obviously, yeah, everything is on the up here. Everything is on the up. So, right, let's get straight to it. What has happened this afternoon? So we've had loads and loads of mixed data, all right? But obviously, we have had, lower jobs, all right? We've had, decrease in GDP. Yes, it was, better than expected, but it's still a bit of a decrease here. And, PC price index has dropped, slightly. So kind of mixed data. It's not easy to read, but basically it's the first like fundamental challenge that obviously the dollar has had so just this kind of outlook, especially of obviously increasing jobs here, it's jobless claims. It's the first kind of growth challenge that the dollar has had since we've since it is kind of bullish run. If we look at the dollar, it's been absolutely flying since like middle of last week here. We kind of having a bit of a challenge here, so potentially might be, seeing some, overall profits being taken off the table. Yields are starting to come into play because they are clearing lower and lower here. So, was holding up well, but obviously, now that they're continuing to crash. Now, obviously, we were selling the dollar this morning, we're buying it this afternoon. This obviously can happen, and obviously it's all things that we need to be aware of. Now, what I'm going to do is, look into the trades that obviously we have posted here, so. I'm going to be waiting. I do think there'll be some lower time frame entries going, obviously, with trend of what we're kind of looking for here. So obviously that's one thing that we can, potentially capitalize on. But I couldn't, you've obviously got to wait for this candle to come out. We saw the first 5 minute candle was like this. We've obviously posted mid this candle here, so I was hoping for a little retest before the continuation. We obviously haven't had that here. There's a few potential areas, especially on pound that we might be looking to enter. I actually think this is a bit low here. So what I want to do ideally is wait about an hour, and obviously see what happens here. If we hold up in this area, potentially might be looking for the second wind to the upside, but obviously ideally if we do come back tap this and then scoot off, that'll be a good plan too. Now, going back to the dollar here, still obviously trending, at these recent highs, crashed down into 105, 101, 500. I keep saying that. Rejected and obviously had a little push up. This is the kind of area here where we, want to be monitoring it. If this area breaks, then yes, we obviously will see this 101 get tapped. That'll be the highest probability for us. So let's wait and see obviously what happens there. Yeah, I'm just kind of monitoring at the moment. The three positions that we've had have run away with us. Just to remind you guys, make sure obviously you getting your questions in the chat if you've got any. Um, but obviously, yeah, everything is, starting to run away with us again here. Euro going to be monitoring this area here, but again, I want to let the next kind of hour play out. Gold is flying, like absolutely flying. If we look at this, since news popped out, we've moved up. What have we moved up? So about 450 pips here. So that's crazy. Um, so yeah, just gonna have to wait and see what happens here. I quite like that we've broken this high here, so that's obviously broken. Next challenge, obviously we got this one here, which obviously looks like we're approaching. And then obviously we've then got this one here as well. But I think if this breaks up, within the next hour, we could see a big upside move today on the dollar. So let's sorry on gold. Let's wait and see obviously what happens here. We've got about 51 minutes of this candle. And obviously this is a 2 hour candle here. Look how many we've engulfed. So there is an impulse move here. If we look at this on a higher time frame, we could potentially target up here. Um, so that's three times what we've been targeting at the moment. So let's wait and see. Yen, obviously expecting, yeah, not a lot here. Yen's been moving slowly. All right, and this has been surprising me because of obviously, obviously oil dropping in price. We've then got, yields dropping in price, hugely. So I'm expecting yen to have a pretty big impulse move. It's just trying to catch it at the right times. It does keep triggering up, higher and higher. I'm expecting half of myself to kind of wake up tomorrow morning and Asia to have created a bit of a downward, tail off here. It all depends on obviously what happens with the dollar. I think if we break through here, yes, we will see, yen kind of crash out because it is due. It's very, very due here. So that's one thing I'm waiting on. But yeah, I'm gonna just monitor for the next probably hour. Probably till about 3, and then obviously we'll look to capitalize after that. We've obviously had this impulse news from the move. Sorry, I'm getting all my words the wrong way around this afternoon. But we've had this impulse move here from obviously news coming out. Um, so it'd be interesting to see obviously what has happened. The other interesting thing, if you didn't watch the recording I did this morning, is we are, let's go on the daily time frame. So oil here has broken those kind of pre-war prices. So war broke out. We obviously gapped up from here all the way up to here, come back retested. Well, we're actually closing below, this previous support here. So it's quite interesting to see where this could end up. I don't think it's gonna happen quickly, but obviously, oil in the last, let's have a look at it, in the last probably 3 weeks has dropped from like 92 all the way down to, below 70. So, some big changes here. So yeah, we've just got to wait and see what's going to happen here. Right, let's have a look through some of these questions. Greg, I think I've answered yours. It's a test on growth. All right, once the dollar, shows a sign of not no growth, but growth, slowing because it can't keep up with the momentum which it was doing, over the last kind of week and a half. So any kind of, signal with GDP, with jobs, any kind of outlook that growth is, slowing, that's gonna, yeah, relieve this bullish run. Even if we get, so what I use, sometimes you can obviously use a RSI. I don't use it all the time, and obviously I wouldn't want anyone to trade off of it. But obviously, if we're looking at the RSI on a higher time frame here, so daily, probably daily's the best. We're in obviously overbought kind of territory here. If you want to understand what a RSI is, it's relative strength index. You can just obviously in the indicators bar, trading view, put relative strength index. Basically, anything above, 70 is overbought, and then anything below 30 is over sold. And obviously, I tend to use it on a higher time frame, but to me, it means, yeah, price needs to come back down slightly. It can't continue with the momentum that it has been. You can see here, and like I'd said, I don't recommend trading off of it, but you can see here price is obviously starting to kind of slow, and then obviously we get this big tail off here, which then drops the RSI from here all the way down to here. But obviously it's, early days of it, but obviously that's a way that you can kind of, uh, check if it's potentially, overbought, which I do think dollar is coming into that territory, just like gold. If I go back onto it, gold, you can see here, gold is over, sold. All right, daily, we already tapped oversold territory here once. We then come back up. We've tapped it again. We're looking like we're potentially rejecting it, but 100% if this momentum continues, I do see the gold copy kicking in. And obviously, also, we're going to be looking potentially a bit later on for a trade, I reckon, around here. So let's wait and see. Could even have a nice longer one here and obviously target this kind of level here. But let's wait and see. That's what I might be looking at a bit later on. Right. Um, Here we go. Simon, I thought overall news for the dollar would have made it stronger, but seems to have weakened it. Yep, like I've said, jobless claims, have obviously increased, and obviously there are less people in work, the less money being spent, and that is what is, obviously. Well, what you have to appreciate as well, the dollar, because everything's been flying, lots of things are always priced in. All right, so lots of things have been priced in. So if you get any kind of, I guess, shock to the, markets, if they've already priced in something and it's not achieved it, you're gonna have an, a alternate reaction. So, that's exactly what's happened here. Tom, do you think gold will pop up to about 40, 42? Yeah, I think it's got to come down and potentially retest this area, but then could potentially bump back up again. Greg, yeah, the way I described it to myself, it had a massive growth that wasn't supported by yields, and a tiny headwind knocked it off its pedestal. I kept waiting for the correction because I thought its growth was mostly hype and not supported by fundamentals. So it's no, dollar has definitely been, strong. It's been performing very, very well, but this, optimism of, strength can only continue. Um, can only, continue at the pace that it was with great data coming out, and any kind of, slight change, like, the US economy is still growing. It's just market is looking at this as growth is, slowing. All right. So that's what it's looking at here. So it's, can it, is it growing with the continued momentum that it's had, or obviously is growth, slowing, and that's what markets priced in, that is starting to, slow, because we all understand here, if I look at a 2 hour time frame or even higher, you can obviously see trend here, what goes up must come down for us to collect these orders to then go back up again, and obviously we've had no real correction here. So I think we are due some kind of a correction potentially here to then collect orders potentially to go back up again. All right. That doesn't mean that dollar's not bullish. It just means that yeah, there's a bit of slower growth, and then we get that continuation up. So that's all we're looking at. It's a shame because all three of our trades have run away, but yeah, let's wait and see. I'm pretty confident there'll be a lower time frame entry, somewhere, but I'd rather wait until after 3 p.m. Because yeah, I just would rather. So gold, potentially, if we get into this area, I might be looking to buy it from here. So yeah, let's wait and see. And obviously TPs, one will be here. Let's just change this to green. One will probably be the next one up, which will be here. Obviously, I'm not saying to take this trade right now. Um, if I get rid of this and I get rid of this, so then we might have one, probably push it a little bit higher then, so potentially here, because I don't like too many TPs. And then we might have one up here as well. But that's kind of what I'm potentially looking at here. But let's wait and see. Danny, first time here. Welcome. When you say copy has kicked in, drop me a message afterwards, and yeah, I'll explain it. It's slower. Only kicks in when condi conditions are spot on, and obviously that doesn't trade around news. But yeah, this is potentially something that I might be looking at here. So that would obviously be gold. Euro, not at the moment. I'm not really interested in it, and obviously pound, not really interested in that either. I'd rather it was down at this area here, but I do like gold from around this area, so I might potentially put that one in a bit later on. But no, that's about it from me this afternoon. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. And yeah, we obviously had a great morning this morning. So obviously hoping that that's going to continue. We've obviously had a brilliant week this week. We've obviously been spot on. Yesterday was brilliant, 100%. We got everything right. We got everything right on Tuesday. We got half of it right on Monday, and then obviously, everything's been right so far this morning too. So, hoping for this to continue, but let's wait and see. Right. Hope everyone has a great afternoon, and obviously it's not too hot in the UK. And yeah, let's smash it. I've had some brilliant feedback from you guys, and that obviously makes me happy. So yeah, well done to everyone. Really, really happy. So have a good one, team. Have a good one.